religious leaders have asked President Uhuru Kenyatta to declare corruption a national disaster. They say it is only then that the fight against corruption can be accorded the importance it deserves. Now, these leaders were speaking during the launch of a national dialogue framework. A National Council of Churches of Kenya Secretary General, Reverend Canon Peter Karanja, said this will eventually facilitate the enactment of the cause spearheaded by the handshake between the president and opposition leader Raila Odinga. Joining us now to give us a perspective on the same is the Deputy General Secretary of the NCCK, Dr. Nelson Makanda. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Declaring corruption a national disaster.
Yes.
This, in your view, is what will work in fighting the vice?
Because we have tried to fight corruption since independence. We have had many commissions investigating matters. We have had different anti-corruption agencies with different names, with different personnel, coming from different professions. We have had many other initiatives led by the police and others led by parliament, and it does appear that all those efforts in the past have not yielded anything. If at all, we continue to hear that the levels of corruptions are going higher. The amounts that are being mentioned are being, they're mind-boggling. The things that are being done now, some of them are border crimes against humanity. Importing and selling sugar, 60% of sugar imported last half of the year was was unfit for animal consumption, let alone human consumption. That's what the PS for Health has told Parliament. And so you realize that corruption it became extremely pervasive. It was not only putting your hands in the pocket to pick money, they are now putting their hands to poison food that Kenyans are going to eat. If that's not a matter that merits national disaster, then what is? What is? And for us as religious leaders, because we think about the welfare of the people, we have no ulterior interest apart from utmost welfare of the Kenyan society. And so we would like the president to take a decision that is decisive, that suspends all other initiatives that are there and technicalities that are usually brought on the table every time you go to court. You are told that the commission was not properly constituted, and so those matters don't stand this case. Or you are told that this other technical matter came up. Sometimes matters are investigated, and the investigators themselves don't seem to be serious about it, or they are colluding. I think that will communicate to everybody, both junior and senior in government, in private sector or otherwise. They will begin to know that the president means what he's saying, and that Kenyans have been rallied to follow one lane, and that lane will be to fight corruption. And so that's what we are saying. Let the president take a decision and declare this a national disaster. We hear more than a third of the budget is lost and wasted in corruption, assuming that a third of the budget, current budget, is $1 trillion. $1 trillion is 3 times the money that is given to the counties. Is enough to sustain the counties for 3 financial years. And so if $1 trillion of Kenyan taxpayers' money, part of it borrowed, that you and I will pay, that our children will pay, is taken and put in people's pockets, and I mean, just for people to feel nice that they have a lot of money in their hands, you keep wondering what is it that they are doing with this money. And so the religious leaders are saying declare it a national disaster. Once you have made that declaration, there will be enactment of legislation, in our view, that allows the president to be able to implement the fight against corruption without being impeded by the laws that are existing. Such laws we propose should be able to allow an amnesty, maybe for 6 months or 1 year, for people who have been involved in past corruption, to come forth and bring the things that they have stolen, make good and confess and give them forgiveness. Draw a line and say, we will draw a line here and we forgive all those who come and confess and return the monies that they have stolen. And then I declare that public officers who are involved or people who are involved in corruption will not hold public office. They take leave and do not hold public office at all for life. A measure that becomes punitive enough for somebody to begin to think this is not something that I want to engage in. And then those who do not come forth and confess and bring their stolen loot, and the ones who engage in new corruptions, let's have more severe and punitive measures on people who are caught to be corrupt, and perhaps strengthen the investigative arm of government, particularly the DCI, so that they are more rigorous, because also the quality of investigation in the past, really many of the cases that have gone before the judiciary have failed on the merit that the case that came before us was not substantive enough to cause a conviction. And so the prosecution did not have sufficient evidence adduced in court. And so that indicts the DCI and the entire directorate. And so maybe revamp it, retrain them, get more specialized investigators, because it looks like corruption in this country has become extremely complicated. So measures that help this country to deal with corruption. Legislate, if people are going to go out there and dish out money in Harambes, put a law that says if we're going to give more than $500,000, it must be checked, so that then we're able to trace where is this money coming from. And perhaps accounting and saying I've given 1 million shillings from my salary or from my family income, so that then it is a legal matter. You do not appear in a Harambe and produce 2 million shillings cash money, and we know that I cannot walk in a bank and withdraw 2 million shillings cash money and carry it. So legislate, even people who want to be philanthropic and want to support community initiatives through so-called Harambes, so that then Harambes do not become avenues of also cleaning and taking up laundered money and people who do not want to account. So measures that will help this country deal with corruption. That's what we are saying.
Dr. Makanda, do you feel as a church that, you know, this time around the president who has personally taken charge on this war on graft, and we have seen changes from the DCI to the Attorney General to the DPP, and we're sort of seeing heads rolling now, but do you think this is something that will be sustained even before he, you know, agrees to declare it a national disaster, as you are asking?
I do think that we have no doubt as a church, we have no reason to doubt the president in the initiative that he has taken. We commend him in the things that he has done in the past 3 or so months in trying to deal with corruption. But we still think that he hasn't done enough, because people have not taken political responsibility. People who have supervised, if I'm a steward of a resource, and 30%, 40% of that resource is alleged to have been stolen, I should not continue to serve in NCCK. And so I think that the president should ask his cabinet ministers to take political responsibility, step aside to facilitate investigations. I mean, the Ministry of Industrialization has always had a responsibility to ensure that sugar that comes into Kenya is clean, not just sugar. If we import a car from Japan, they check whether it has some radiation or not, and certificates are sent from Japan before the car is brought into Kenya. What happened with sugar? Food? I mean, so the minister cannot be still enjoying state resources having failed in such a significant way. I mean, people have to take responsibility. And so, whereas we think the president has done well, and he seems to be on a good track, we feel that those who sit with him at the table are the ones who are stabbing him from behind, and they are more or less making his initiative moribund, because these people must cover themselves. They must seek to make sure that they are not blamed. But yet, publicly, it's obvious for us that they hold the highest responsibility for the protection of Kenyans and Kenyan resources. So the president, yes, he's doing a good job. I think we still ask him to do more. and we support him. We fully support him in the initiative that he's undertaking to fight corruption.
My director is telling me we're running out of time, but just very briefly, in as far as healing the nation and the church is concerned, and you know, the handshake happened and steps are being made towards building bridges, you know, towards unity and healing this country. What role is the church playing in ensuring that this actually happens? Very briefly.
One is to say that yesterday we launched a framework for national dialogue. We think that Kenyans need to come together and talk. And so we appreciate the President for the initiative he has put forth in appointing the 14-member team task force. We have put forth about 7 issues that we think that Kenyans need to discuss. And so the church, together with the other members of the religious sector, are holding a conference early August at Bomas of more than 600 delegates to discuss issues that have been raised. In the document that they signed with the Prime Minister, there were about 9 issues. We have summarized them to about 7 issues, and we hope that we can bring these delegates who are coming from all sectors, civil society, the industrial sector, workers, and expatriates, and donors, and foreign embassies, academics, and theologians. We'd like to discuss these issues. Let me just mention them briefly. Bring a closure to 2017 general election. Decisive action to deal with corruption is the second one. The third one is constitutional and legal reforms that we need, security sector reforms, national cohesion, accelerated service delivery, which includes issues of the 7 things that the President has mentioned and Jubilee has undertaken to implement in the next 5 years: devolution, institutional reform, and governance. So we hope that we can rally these delegates who come to discuss, and we are seeking even to invite the political parties and their leaders to come and be part of this process, so that then give them a safe environment where nobody is being victimized. You are free and open to speak openly and contribute towards the Kenya that we desire.
All right.
And we ask that media will be part of this process. Media will communicate, and they will help us take this message forth, that we desire a better Kenya. And if we desire a better Kenya, all of us must be engaged in discussion.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nelson Makanda, for speaking to us on the program.
Appreciate it.
That has